The US, UK, and Australia have very similar investment environments. Obviously, the US is much larger, but the way we think about investment means that there's a lot easier alignment. The UK has traditionally invested in the US. UK and Australian companies come here to expand. From a technical perspective, we are the deepest of deep defense partners. We work together in everything from responding to humanitarian crises all the way up to frontline combat.
This is All Quiet on the Second Front, the podcast where boring conversations around defense tech and national security come to die. Join me, Tyler Sweatt, and my Second Front comrades as we dismantle the mundane and cut through the bureaucratic BS to demystify the world of defense tech. But be warned, this is not a typical government podcast. Ready to get weird?
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of All Quiet on the Second Front, the podcast where boring defense talk comes to die. I'm your host, Tyler Sweatt, joined by a longtime friend, first-time visitor, Rich Julien. So thanks for coming by, brother.
Oh, no problem, Tyler. I wish this hadn't taken so long to put together.
Yeah.
We've tried multiple times.
I know. Some technical difficulties on site a few times. So usually open up with, give the people a little bit about your background, sort of what you've done throughout the career, what you're working on now. I've had the ability to build what I consider a tremendous relationship with you over many years. Some of our listeners haven't had that, haven't been so fortunate. So who are you? What's your path been? What are you working on?
Well, I was born on a cold and stormy day. No, honestly, so I started out as an Army enlisted guy who could spell computer, so I became a computer specialist. Literally, my first job was being a principal investigator for a DARPA project. And from that point on, I pretty much have been involved in deep technology, emergent innovation technologies. Ended up getting a commission, doing stuff with that. When I left my career after that, I've been at multiple government agencies and at companies ranging from huge corporates to small companies at the initial starting stages. I founded and exited a company. I founded and started a company in 2008, which went as expected. So I've been on those.
Great time to start companies.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful time. But in the last 8 years, I've been at AWS running their national security, defense, and space startup business. So really, my entire career has been about finding innovative solutions to challenging problems faced in the defense and intelligence community. And it's really my passion, and that was the reason for my jumping from AWS and joining BOKA.
Yeah. So give me the sort of once over on BOKA. What are you guys looking at? What's interesting to you guys? What change? What outcome are you guys trying to drive to?
Yeah, we are quite literally an AUKUS investor, right? We invest in national security for the US, UK, and Australia, taking advantage of the new tripartite alliance. And when we say national security, we actually mean more than just the defense and things like that. It is all of those things that go into national security, from energy resilience to critical infrastructure to epidemiological challenges to defense. And so we're looking at technologies all around that. We look at dual use technologies, although I hate the term, I've heard me say this many times. Nobody wants two uses. They want multi-use technology. But we're looking for companies in that. We're a growth stage investor. So we really are that next phase when you hit the point where you want to hit the gas and grow the company. You've proven the tech, you've proven the capability, you have those initial set of customers, and you're looking to grow and scale it. So we operate in a space in the market where we saw a gap. There weren't enough specialist investors in this growth stage. There are a lot of phenomenal partners with many of whom at that early stage, but we really wanted to create something that helped those companies turbocharge once they get that point where now they're ready to grow and scale and go reach out for funds.
Yeah. So as you think about kind of partners in that broader value chain, how is BOKA and how have you sort of throughout your career sort of built longstanding partnerships? You came running a lot of that ecosystem from AWS and stuff. How does BOKA sort of approach that? And, if somebody's a either a company or an earlier stage investor, how should they think about, hey, am I right to come talk to BOKA or learn a little more?
Oh, yeah. Look, I'm a firm believer in partnerships, right? You can't get anywhere in the national security domain. Frankly, in the enterprise level of anything, you can't get anywhere without partnerships. You will never be able to create the base you need to grow there. And there are companies out there and specialize in it. As I always tell founders, focus on your secret sauce. If somebody else does other parts of it, partner with them and let them do those parts. You don't have to do everything. Companies who try to do everything is where they struggle and they can't get off the ground. Look, when you're $100 billion business, you can take second front anywhere you want it to go, right? Until you get there, you've got to stay focused on what is it that you do? What is your secret that helps you achieve success and make your customers successful? And then who can help you get there? Because partners are the way to get there faster, to tap into resources you don't have. And my favorite challenge for most companies who are entering the defense and national security domain is you have no clue about post-deployment support. You just don't. Don't even pretend to. Bring in the people who do that. And there are people who are phenomenal. And that can really help you hit the ground running with government and national security customers, including other big partners who are just as big of a customer for you. And it can help you get into the market much faster because it helps you get accepted. And so a lot of what we do at BOKA is create that connection, right? We try to help them figure out, hey, I'm going into this area and here's my technology. We're much more interested after we write you a check. How do we help you execute that check in the way that is going to help you succeed fastest? Because if you succeed, we succeed. So we want to help you hit the ground running. So a lot of it is, who are those partners? If I need a platform play, who do I reach out to a platform? If I need to go CSP, what makes sense? There are a lot of different providers, and it really depends on the specific customer you're targeting, the relationships you have or need, and we help you construct that kind of go-to-market approach, even if that market is the partner market.
Where do you talk about sort of the need for partnerships and really having that sort of like corporate EQ and like knowing what you do and what you don't do and what you should make or versus what you should buy or partner. Where are you seeing misconceptions or common mistakes, especially as folks have like an AUKUS lens on and they're seeing sort of the policy and they're seeing the news? What are folks getting wrong as they're sort of making their first approaches in?
I think the biggest challenge for people on their first approach is you got to approach it, right? You can't keep holding off till you get the perfect opportunity, right? Take a push into the area. Even if it doesn't work the first time, you don't get that first contract or task order or even a sitter going forward with that. So what? There are other customers that are out there that can leverage the same kind of capability. Use it as that learning experience because you're not going to win all those challenges here. You are competing against some of the best and the brightest in the world out there at this huge scale, all the way down to the mom and pop shops, right? You've got a ton of competition that's out there. So take a swing at it, right? If you don't get up there and take a swing, you're never going to get there. It's challenging to miss on some of those things, right? It always hurts, but you can learn from it. Ask for feedback. Constantly ask for feedback. And once you get that feedback, try to adopt it as best you can. And that feedback can come from the customers. It can also come from partners like yourself, right? If you're helping somebody with their accreditation models, you can help explain to them, hey guys, I love you, but you got to do this, this, and this before you get.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where taking it up sort of one level, and reflecting back on sort of the really sort of interesting and diverse set of experience you have, like what's different about AUKUS? Like what has you guys excited about it versus, maybe other different agreements or policy sort of lattices that have come up? I'm sensing not just from you, but in the market, like just a ton of excitement around AUKUS. Like what's making this different or more real, should I say?
There are a lot of things like in the investor space, right? The US, UK, and Australia have very similar investment environments. Obviously, the US is much larger, but the way we think about investment, the way we think about doing that means that there's a lot easier alignment. The UK has traditionally invested in the US. UK and Australian companies come here to expand. It's a natural growth target for US companies because it's all English-speaking countries. From a technical perspective, look, we are the deepest of deep defense partners, right? We work together in everything from responding to humanitarian crisis all the way up to frontline combat, right? We go into battle together in half years. When this thing with AUKUS is really formalizing some of that stuff that has always been there, but it never hit until we got into conflict. This is like putting it on the ground up front and saying, look, we're great partners. They've had the example of Five Eyes, which has driven the intelligence community for years. And AUKUS is really taking Five Eyes and spreading it broader and saying, now we can get into industry, defense industrial base, expansion of our country's capabilities. I think the final piece to that is just the technology and reality of it. There is no such thing as a technology the U.S. Department of Defense does not carry. There is no such thing as a technology that does not have an impact on the national security of our countries, one form or fashion or another. Social media has an impact. Deep technologies, healthcare technologies, space technology, they all have that impact. And trying to sift through all this and find those things and bring it to customers who recognize, and this is what I love about AUKUS, the governments recognize they are challenged in doing this, and they're reaching out to industry for a hand, which is why when you look at what AUKUS is, changes to the export controls, changes to ITAR, these have not occurred in the past. The recognition that we need to think more broadly and also think more allied is really driving this.
Yeah, I think the changes to the ITAR and like the pillar structure, I think those are sort of like an X and Y axis were really, really interesting in terms of putting some teeth behind this and really starting to signal to the market that, hey, this is real and we should probably start to rally around it. With that in mind and thinking about, interoperability and different sort of compliance or data handling and things like that, what are some of the challenges that companies are going to have to think about either A, sort of selling and delivering, like, yes, under AUKUS, but to the Australians, to the British, to the US, or thinking about maintaining compliance between all that? What's that sort of look like? Or are we still kind of on the early stages of this?
We're definitely still in the early stages. We are three countries separated by a common language because things we say are very different from each other. The way that we approach that, our regulatory compliance controls are different, right? There is some alignment, there is some crossover, and we're trying to find ways to reinforce those areas where we have the concurrence going into it. We're trying to find ways to kind of reduce the impact of some of the places where there is some conflict. And then there has been so far a real support coming out of the political side of the house, which you don't normally see where there's not really a lot of conflict in this, right? Both sides of the aisle in the US, the multiple sides of the aisle in the UK and Australia recognize that this is good for our country. So there's been a lot of support going into that. And I think that dynamic is really important, right? Because there is not this is one group doing it, everybody else can object to it. We all recognize this is an important thing in this world of conflict we find ourselves in. And so I think that is really kind of leaning into this. But it is early stage, right? Compliance controls are really different in there. The way we handle data, right? The UK is still trying to figure out, now that they've exited from the EU, what are their rules anymore, because they're no longer consistent with that. The US is very quickly realizing that we need to change how we think about privacy and all this stuff being driven by AI. Let's be honest, AI is changing the entire way we have to think about this stuff. And the Australians are out in the same thing, and the Australians are a heck of a lot closer to the primary competitions that we face.
On that sort of clients, data handling, sort of all of that, we talk about sort of three countries separated by a common language. I've heard whispers increasingly of additional sort of partner nations trying to or wanting to sort of become party to AUKUS, either from a Rich hat or a BOKA hat. How do you guys think about like the longevity? Like what what is AUKUS today? What is it tomorrow? What is it when it hits, full run rate or FOC or however you want to, what's that vision?
I honestly think AUKUS is going to remain AUKUS. I really don't see it. And with the understanding that, look, Canada already had the relationship with AUKUS thanks to NORAD, right? So there was already that relationship. I think not only are we the English-speaking countries going into this, but I think these are the closest allies we've had. We have literally fought on the lines together, bled together. These are three countries that are not going to be separate, right? But I think it's almost like concentric rings here. We have these close allies. You can't deal without those allies. In the Pacific Rim, there's some phenomenal partners that we out there in Japan and Singapore and emerging countries which we've had conflict with in the past, but are seeing more alignment with, like Vietnam and Malaysia. In Europe, you've got NATO. Look, NATO has been an absolutely crucial alliance to establishing the world today. And as the world changes, that has to start changing too. And then we can't ignore what's going on in Africa and South America. So there will always be the need to kind of extend the capabilities to others. It may not be inside the tightest shot group of the center of the thing, but it will always be, hey, we can't do this without our partners in Japan and South Korea. We can't do this without our partners in Norway, Sweden, Finland, name all the 32 countries now, right, in NATO. But when you get to NATO, it has its own set of challenges. When you have 30 countries, there's a continuous push and pull that goes on within 30 countries. While you have that push and pull within 3 countries, it's a lot easier to negotiate between 3 countries than it is between 30.
That's right. Talking about sort of the targeted nature of it and keeping it focused, how does a company know or a founder know, like, when should they pay attention to AUKUS? What does sort of product market fit look like for them? Or is it hey, they've sort of maybe hit exit velocity, the hockey stick in one of the 3, and it's if then, hey, this is useful for US DoD or USIC or Australia MOD or IC. How do they think about that?
So as you know, my favorite thing that Amazon taught me was the answer of, it depends. Because there is no simple answer to that, right? I always tell founders when I'm working with early stage companies that, hey, think big. If you're successful, where are you going to? Right? You have to start thinking about that, because how do you get there if you're not already planning? In some cases, it's a request for an inbound request. You get a customer who says, hey, I like what you got, show it to me. In some cases, you're ready to grow and scale, and you've got the market and the ability to raise funds that the US operating. Or you've got a really great technology. Look, I got to tell you, if you want to deploy something, get those initial tests and stuff done, the Australians are unbelievable about taking products to the field, banging on them, and then giving you test results. It's a great partnership to look at with that. So it really kind of depends on what you're trying to get into and where you are in your lifespan. But you can't ignore the conjoined market that is Australia, US, and UK. You can't ignore the platform and capabilities it gives you. Let's say you've got a space technology. The locational aspects that the 3 countries provide to you alone gives you coverage of a vast sector of the globe, right? So it's a huge potential for companies to really engage with and grow with. But it really comes down to where you are today. But if you think you've got something that goes there, very few people have deeper pockets than the U.S. government. Very few commercial entities have deeper pockets than the U.S. investment systems, everywhere from VC to PE to banks to corporate investors. So there is a market and a support mechanisms that are out there. Not that you have to take that money, but if that's what you're looking to do and grow and scale, it's a great target environment.
Yeah. So how do people, how'd somebody how do they get in contact? How do they engage with AUKUS? Like, what does that look like?
Well,
or how should they think about it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the best way right now is DIU. And I say that because there's a DIU in the US, UK, and Australia, right? So I mean, there's just kind of there are these innovation hubs that have been established in all 3 countries. I've worked with the UK National Cyber Center, who are phenomenal. The NIF, InQtel, DARPA. I mean, there are all these organizations that exist out there. You can do some of those initial contacts. But you can also reach out to the companies that kind of provide those intermediary services, like Second Front, like some of the cloud providers. Some of those that can also help you identify, hey, I think I've got something. I think it's scalable, valuable going into it, and you can work with them to get into these markets.
No, and I was curious to see what you were going to say, because I haven't figured out the like, hey, here's the AUKUS front door you go knock on. It has been more of a coalition of the willing. There are proving grounds and battle labs sort of all over, to your point. There's IXGs, there's DIUs, there's, all that.
If anything, probably InQtel is the most
Yeah,
crossover
fair.
because they're established in all three countries from a U.S. perspective.
Yeah,
In the
that's a good
UK,
point.
they do an incredible job out of the UK Space Agency and their space bridge that they have with the Australians. So there are different components that you can connect to into it. But I think really just the interest alone, you can find lots of folks that are out there. There are more organizations that you can shake a stick at and more appearing every day. And then there are some phenomenal integration partners and also some of the incubators and accelerators that are out there going into it in all three countries. Startup Sydney, Y Combinator, Techstars here in the US. You got Plexol and some others inside the UK. These can give you kind of that feel for the environment before you go in deep. You can make a small engagement and investment to join one of those incubator accelerators. And then from there, realize, hey, is there really a market there? And by the way, thank you for being in my accelerator.
Yeah, I was just going to say, been through an accelerator. They're tremendous. Also have been a long time sort of fanboy partner, everything of Plexol, and couldn't foot and stop harder for stuff they're doing over there in the UK. As you look, last question we always sort of ask is, a king for a day, sort of if you could wave a wand, what would you change? I'm going to like slightly reconfigure and just say, as you look forward, instead of looking at like today and yesterday and saying, oh, I would change X, as you look forward, right? What's the one thing, if you were like, hey, I can make sure a thing happens, what's the thing you would make sure happens as we think about like AUKUS and the relationships between the partner countries, the capital allocators, the government sort of mission users, the builders, sort of everything there?
Honestly, codifying law here in the US. The biggest challenge we have right now is we have an ever-shifting political landscape. And the idea of things changing underneath an alliance like this can break the trust. It can break the engagement that we've been there with it. So codifying it in law, that's the one thing that I'd want to change so that it would actually be there as a more permanent capability. There's always change over time, but really it's to avoid the hour by hour change that we have in our politics today, right? No matter where you fall in the political spectrum, you just want to make sure that things like this that are absolutely key, and I think everybody recognizes this is key to success over time, is having these close alliances and partnerships, both from a business perspective, a technical perspective, a financial perspective, and then of course the geopolitical perspective. Having that codified down would be huge.
Yeah, I love that. Making it more predictable so folks can, because that codification allows folks to then invest into it. Whereas if people are worried, it's a stroke of the pen away from being no more. It makes it pretty difficult to outlay like multi-year sort of capital into it.
Multi-year capital for an emerging company, it makes it really difficult because while we talk about the ability for a startup to pivot, the reality is they only have a finite amount of resources. And every time they pivot, they reduce the amount of resources they have available. So you could lose a lot of the really high potential companies that are just getting off the ground. And that's where our best and brightest are finding themselves these days. So we don't want to impact that because that is our differentiator. That entrepreneurial system is what sets the US and our allies apart from the rest of the world. Nobody else can touch or match that.
Yeah, dude, I love that. Rich, you fired me up, dude. Every time we chat, I am re-energized and just Not that the passion ever goes away, but it's a little bit more gas on the fire, brother. So I appreciate you still being in the fight and sort of everything you're doing. And thanks for spending a little time together today, bro.
Yeah, I love it. And I really wish that there were more places where folks can come in and share and push this out. I've loved the chat, watching your blog going into this, and some more that have started to pop out there too. So I'm really glad that people are getting a chance to express this out there, because better together.
Okay. Amen. So, well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Cheers.